Don't miss Voidheart Symphony on Backerkit.com, where you can sign up for its upcoming re-release. The link is in the show notes. You're listening to a Rowan, Rick and Deckard Fireside Chat. Hello, dear listener, and welcome to a Voidheart Symphony Fireside Chat. My name is Grant Howitt. You may have heard me previously playing Cast a Script in our Heart AP, or maybe writing a book, but I'm joined today by the author of Voidheart Symphony, Mina McJanda.
Hello.
Hello. Now, we don't have a fireside. Hello. We don't have a fireside, but I'm trying to adopt a sort of brandy-laden voice. We are recording this in the depths of winter. It is frosty, it is cold, both in Sheffield, where I am, and in, I want to say, New Mexico.
Yep, Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Yes! But we are here for a fireside chat. We're here to just have a bit of a chat about Voidheart Symphony, what it is, and rather than ask you to explain it again, Mina, because you've already done the thing, so I will explain the thing for you.
And then I can correct you when you get it wrong.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
So Voidheart Symphony is a role-playing game.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, okay, I'm going to be checking. Voidheart Symphony is a tabletop role-playing game published by, initially UFO Press, and then, once we commenced Operation Largest Friend and Ate Mina, Rowan, Rick and Deckard, who now run UFO Press, for the want of a better word.
Yes, it's very cosy inside the belly of the beast. Good working relationship, I think.
Thank you for not kicking me in the sternum too often. Voidheart Symphony is a primarily powered by the Apocalypse game, although it does also use systems from the Resistance system, pioneered first in Spire by me and Chris, to simulate both the elements of being a real-world marginalised person, not quite in an underclass, perhaps on the edge of society. And it uses Apocalypse World for a sort of freewheeling magical girl transformation, full free-flowing combat which takes place in a magical dreamscape contained with, from what I can tell, capitalism.
Capitalism's part of it, but broader hegemony, all systems of hierarchy, all systems of oppression, any time that someone is using their power over others to inflict pain.
Yes. Now, I will say, I've been writing a lot of the promotional materials for the Backerkit, which this podcast is presumably part of what's promoting, and it's been fascinating to try and work out exactly what Mina was talking about, because she's been very hands-off with the lore.
For years now, you've been telling me you need to write setting in your games, you need to write lore in your games, all that sort of thing, and I've just had this feeling at the back of my head, but like, they'll pick it up from context, right? The sort of Dark Souls item description approach to world building. And as it turns out, this sort of process, building up a crowdfunding platform, having other people write ad copy for it, has really made me realize, yes, I need to write down coherently what is going on in this game.
Hey,
so thanks for that.
We've made some guesses, and I think I got about 80% of the way there.
The vibes are important. You know, it's a game I try to put a lot of thought into, in terms of like who you are fighting, what you are doing, what all of this maps to in terms of real world analogy kind of stuff.
I'm going to immediately go inside baseball on this. I'm going to immediately start talking shop.
Go for it.
So I've been writing role-playing games semi-professionally and professionally since 2016. Pretty much about the same length of time as you have. And my first couple of games were similarly hands-off in terms of story, in terms of fiction, in terms of fluff. Like Unbound expressly doesn't have any. And Chris and I went back through and cut out anything which might be considered fluff from some of the powers, just to make them not too evocative. And then, following a transformative experience in a Costa Rican jungle, where I burnt a list of my fears at midnight, I came back and then started writing books with massive settings in. And I think for me, the lack of setting in my work was a lack of confidence. I was not confident around communicating this imaginary world to the people who were reading it. But I don't feel it's a lack of confidence in your work. I mean, I think if anything, it's a confidence which pushes your lack of fiction and your lack of fluff. And I'd be interested to hear why you have left so much up to the reader and up to the players at the table.
Yeah, I think what it comes down to is when I sit down to design a game, what I'm trying to build is a storytelling tool, right? Something that a group puts on the table and they pull its levers and press its buttons, and together they use this to make a story. Like, I don't make the story, they do. So what I create, like, the mechanics that drive that machine. I create, like, the shape of the machine and, like, the broad range of outputs and inputs it has.
Just to get inside the actor's studio on you, what shape is your machine? What does it look like? Because mine's one of those cockamamie Heath Robinson machine that makes you breakfast things.
I see.
What does yours look like?
I'm thinking of mine as like sort of a big piece of clockwork, you know? Kind of, I don't know, like... You know the Room series of games where you have like a sort of weird cube that unfolds and does things?
Yeah.
Kind of like those.
Quite precise and ordered in that way, and a series of interlocking devices which hide one another.
Yes, that's why my games have so many like interlocking subsystems, because that is very sort of compelling to me, the idea of like all these gears turning against each other in a way that produces emergent results, right? Like, I think Vincent Baker said, like, the point of role-playing game system is to produce outcomes no one at the table would have done, would have suggested if left to their own devices. Playing, like, cops and robbers at the table is sort of the flaw that we're trying to improve on.
That's an interesting thing. Like, it's flaw as in base rather than flaw as in problem.
Yes.
Right,
like,
yes. Okay, cool.
hanging out with your friends and telling stories together is already very powerful as a sort of thing that is fun to do and a compelling activity. So our job as game designers is to produce something better than just a bunch of people sat around a table hanging out with each other.
I also think that our job as game designers is to provide people license to do that and give them the authority to make up stories. Because past
that's a good point.
6, we're told to stop doing that.
Yeah, it's also the thing of like, you need to build on that, but you also need to build under that sort of thing. You need to provide scaffolding for this specific activity that the group is doing to make sure that they have the support, because it is different than people sat around a table bullshitting. And so they need structure to support that in a way that they wouldn't for the bullshitting. But also, it'd be nice if the interworkings of the game provide interesting, fascinating, emergent outcomes that they wouldn't have reached on their own.
The more that I write games, and honestly, the more that I play games, I haven't really played a lot of role-playing games for quite a while. But I was so if you're listening to this, it'll be on our podcast feed. You hopefully will have listened to me being in the actual play. And it was a real eye-opener for me, because I've not really been in a 10-game arc for fucking years. And the role-playing, the role-playing, the interesting bits of it, were nothing to do with the mechanics. Well, like, they fed back into it. And as role-playing game designers, there is the part of the challenge we face is how much of this is making shit up with your friends, and how much of this is a game. So, like, Dungeons & Dragons is a game. And there's ways to be good at it. There's ways to be good at making characters. There's ways to make clever tactical decisions. There's the right and wrong feats to take. And it feels good to be good at a thing in that way. And so, like, I think Apocalypse World is very much over the other end, in that you're not supposed to be good at Apocalypse World.
Well, you can be. We saw the speedrunning mechanics that we talked about in the work Discord.
Oh, yes. There's a fascinating Tumblr post. I think it's the Hardholder and someone else, and the Angel, I think, have 2 sex moves. And as long as you never let the GM describe anything, you can instantly hit max level just by having sex over and over, which is just like real life.
Yeah. Apocalypse World is a game about, like, experiencing these characters' interpersonal dramas more than it is winning. Like, in Apocalypse World, you are there to vibe kind of thing, The GM mainly is there to make sure that situations keep occurring. Setting up PC, NPC, PC triangles where, like, multiple PCs want a different thing from one NPC and that kind of thing, just so sparks keep flying, a bit like being a reality show producer.
Yeah, I always felt like Apocalypse World, the actual pitch of it was like, you are the 5 sexiest people alive after the apocalypse, and you live tumultuous lives, and they're supposed to be bumping up against each other.
Yeah, you're not meant to be, like, thinking about, how would I survive in an apocalypse?
Nope.
You're more talking about, you are one of the characters in an HBO miniseries set in the post-apocalypse. And what would make an interesting experience for the audience.
Yeah, and I think that's something which Apocalypse World does. When I was getting into role-playing games, it was kind of before Apocalypse World, and so it arrived when I was firmly established as a role player. And it really caused something of a revolution, I think, perhaps in role-playing games, or certainly a movement. I don't think they didn't, Baker didn't overthrow anything. It really changed the way a lot of people thought about role-playing games in a postmodern sense, in that it takes the idea from here's a world which we are simulating to the role-playing game's about the main characters. So you don't need to have rules for anything else. You don't need to have rules for how far away something is. You just need to know if the guy gets hurt running towards it, or what do you lose? And it was this incredible crystallization of story games which had been brewing for a while. And I feel, up until Blades in the Dark replaced it, it was the thing that the people were writing it. Like looking at Dungeon World, which is pretty much probably the most successful Apocalypse World role-playing game, I'd say. Probably more successful than Apocalypse World.
That or Monster Hearts, I'd say. But absolutely.
Yeah. Monster Hearts is a heartbreaking work of staggering genius, and Dungeon World is quite respect what it's doing, but it is a Dungeons and Dragons simulator. It simulates the feeling of playing D&D. And there is kind of a plastic, hands-off nature with Apocalypse World. It's the opposite of like Merkborg. It's not gritty, it's not crunchy. You visibly, by anyone who's seen your work, fucking love Apocalypse World.
The core of Apocalypse World, for me, right? So you look at traditional RPGs, your D&Ds and your World of Darknesses and whatever, and you look at what they call the core mechanic, and it'll be something to do with the dice, right? Like in D&D, roll a d20, add your stat, beat target number, whatever. In Apocalypse World, it's a different framing of the core mechanic, because the core mechanic in Apocalypse World is when a character does X, Y thing happens. Like, it's very clear in Vince and Meg's writing that the conversation, the people around a table talking about the stories, is the default mode of play, right? When you're talking about what happens, what goes on, all that sort of improv nature of it all. But occasionally, something will happen that will shrink down the range of possibilities to a very specific fork, Like, I like to analogize it to, like, imagine you're going to an improv theater production, right? People are on stage talking their way through some sort of, interpersonal drama or whatever. But they have a rule in the theater production where when you stand on this X painted on the stage, everyone else goes quiet and a spotlight goes on you and you monologue kind of thing. That's a move in Apocalypse World terms. There's a point where the game wants it to be very clear how this sort of story beat goes down. And so all the possibilities narrow down, and sometimes that's determined by a role, by a stat, or like what character traits you have. But either way, there is a point where we are going to tell a story in this particular way right now. And that so clearly goes towards what I love about writing RPGs, building the sort of the shape of the vessel that the story gets poured into,
The shape, that's interesting. I view it as one half of a thing. Like I'm building half of a machine, or I'm telling the first third of a story. I think I might stop letting players make their own characters. They just keep getting it wrong. Like totally, they fuck it up.
You've made Eat the Reich, so...
Yes. Almost our most popular game to date. Which has no character creation rules in it. Because, like, just play a cool person. Anyway. The mechanics, the shape of it is interesting. And I think your point about moves, like, they enshrine certain things within the system, as within the story, as like, this matters, and no one gets final say aside from the dice. There is something sacrosanct about this. The original Apocalypse World, the first edition, had 4 or 5 basic moves. And there are a few additional ones or modifications to those put into the character classes, but it was very much like everything else is a conversation. Everything else is free Krieg Rollspiel, or however it's pronounced, which is talking. And then we have these things enshrined. We have these sacrosanct ideas where if you want to argue with someone, if you want someone to do something and they don't want to do it, cool, here's what happens. And I can definitely see a measure of streamlining and a measure of like, well, we don't want to have this back and forth bullshit. Let's just do this, which I think is espoused beautifully by the turn someone on move in Monster Hearts. It's also like a fascinating way of representing teenage sexuality. But with the proliferation of Apocalypse World, we can see there's games which have far more in the way of moves, much like yours. And I believe you once told me that if something could be a move, make it a move.
Yes.
Obviously, like, limitations breed creativity. But in terms of those moves, how do you pick out which moves are enshrined? How do you say, right, this matters and this doesn't? As opposed to something like D&D, where it's like, okay, you're always going to be rolling a D20, and you're always going to be adding a stat, and maybe a skill, and you work that out at the table.
Some of it is playing by ear. Just, when I'm starting to design a game, I kind of work out what the main modes of the story is first. Okay, so like in Legacy Life Among the Ruins, for example, the modes would be like when you're deciding the broad sweeps of your family's actions, when you're like having an adventure as a character, and as sort of time is passing between generations. So those are 3 modes, each of which needs some moves of their own. In Voidheart, it was like you're dealing with your mundane concerns, you're conducting some kind of investigation in the mundane world, and you're doing kick-ass action in the other world. So then you think about, like, what are the cool things, the things that scenes will pivot on in those modes, kind of thing.
What's your crux?
Like, the core verbs,
Yeah. I think there's a measure of that in putting together a skill list for any game.
Yeah, like...
well. And what are our important verbs? What are and also, like, I think more so in Apocalypse World, what are the verbs that change the world?
Yeah, exactly. And they don't need to be big, grand things. Like, if I was going to make an Apocalypse World game based on, I don't know, Destiny, for example.
Oh, good God, I suppose you could, yeah.
The core moves would probably be something like take a shot, take cover, channel power,
I remember and
traverse the environment would be a thing. There'd be some cooler name for it. Do a big floaty jump.
I tell you what would be interesting. The Halo Apocalypse World game. I think that's the thing. I look at Apocalypse World, which has this enshrining, which has this... You can have a separate mechanic for different things. And what the crux is that brings it together and how is it interesting. Is Throw Grenade an interesting move to have?
Yeah.
I think maybe not in Halo, but definitely in a crowded city centre. There's something fun. Well, dramatically interesting. Yeah. Yes. Anyway,
Yes.
I'm waffling. Let's not make the Halo role-playing game. What I would like to do is come back to... something you said earlier about interlocking systems.
Yes.
And you describe your role-playing machine as a beautiful lacquered box containing a series of whirring cogs. So Voidheart Symphony contains 2 interlocking games. There is the more complex game, I think, or the more granular game of the action in the castle and the nighttime stuff. And there is the more abstracted stuff which takes place in the real world with the resistance system. And it's quite rare to see a game which has entirely different mechanics for different parts of it. So firstly, 1, why'd you do that? And 2, what was that like?
So 1 was because I really wanted to hit the feeling that these are 2 different realms you're jumping between. And they're not, like, entirely distinct. The relationships you have give you power in both the city and in the castle. Yeah. The conditions that you're currently suffering, whether you're frightened or cowed or whatever, those can have impacts in the city and in the castle, that kind of thing. I wanted it to create this feeling that you might be disempowered in the city. You might be a member of this, maybe of an underclass or a marginalized community, or you're disabled or whatever else. But once you get into the castle, like, all bets are off. You're moving beyond the mundane world where material concerns are a huge, like, limiter to a realm of kind of pure possibility I like to describe the sort of castle and the void around it as like all the things that don't exist, you know? And everything that doesn't exist is available to you there. You are powerful there in a way that you are not in the city. And like, I wanted to provide players room to play someone who was, you know, for example, had physical disabilities in the mundane world and have trouble even like raising a fist against someone in the mundane world, but they can be that empowered hero in the other world, for example. And, you know, I wanted to create the feeling of like there are these two separate fronts you're having to fight on. Because you can't just do everything in the impossible other world. Like, imagination isn't enough to save you. You have to address material conditions. You know, that's what we call a theme. And so, like,
steady on.
It's very interesting to me, the idea of, like, having these two different skill sets you have to bring to bear, and they are not necessarily balanced at all.
No.
But, you know, as a community, as a crew of rebels, maybe one of you is much better equipped to deal with problems in the mundane world. Like, if someone is, like, I don't know, a chief research scientist or a news anchor or whatever, which is a possibility as a starting character, they have access to so many things that other people don't. Maybe, you know, when it's time comes to, like, turn into your cool rebel form and throw down with a giant demon, they're less capable there. Who knows? And so you go. No, you do
I
that.
really like the magical girl transformation. I don't think we get enough of them in games. So we played it on, the League Presents podcast?
Yes.
And, you know, we had our sort of ragtag group of weirdos, and we descended into the depths of the other world and emerged in the castle. And we got this cool, proper card capture Sakura, spinning camera, magical transformation. I found it really exciting and really empowering. And we have something similar in Die, which Kieran puts in every single game he's recorded and every single game that he's GM'd, but didn't write it down in the book very much. We forgot to put that bit in, I think. I think that physical transformation and the shift to this is my rebel form, and how the things that the rebel form, you might have wings. I find that really charming and really evocative of this isn't real, it's more and less than real.
Yes.
It is potential in here.
I also, one thing I really am proud of is there's a mechanic where, like, every time that you gain or lose power as a rebel, you change that form. You add or remove elements to it as you go. I mean, there's the classic sort of magical girl plot beat of, she used to have white wings, but now one of them is turning black. And, what does that mean? And that sort of thing. But, like, it's fun to change, you know, your presentation. I mean, okay, like, now I said that, and I'm realizing myself as a person, it's kind of... Yes, of course I would think it's fun to change your presentation, but I think everyone can have fun playing dress up.
That's what we call a theme. And also, it brings me on to my next question, actually, and I think this is kind of the crux of the interview, so I'm going to pop it in the middle.
We're going to the crux part of the interview.
Yeah, we're going right to the crux. Why did you write Voidheart Symphony?
Oh, well. Okay, so there are a few different answers to this, and I'm going to give you all of them. Firstly, I made it because I wanted to make another game, because I needed to make money to be able to live.
Delightful.
Secondly, I made it because I'd made Rhapsody of Blood, and I really loved that game of gothic castle delving. I got to make my Castlevania fanfiction game. But part of that game is a sort of generational thing, right? Every generation, the blood moon rises, the Gothic castle appears with a new regent ruling it, filling their unholy grail for evil ends, whatever, and a new generation of heroes rises. And I played a few campaigns of it, but, like, by the time we got to the modern day, I don't know, it didn't feel like so resonant, right?
The sort of Dracula rocking up.
The Dracula thing. And you can have a lot of fun with that, like, contrast, right? A Dracula castle in the modern day, like, Soma Cruise fans know what I'm talking about. But
I don't.
Well, there we are. That's a little Easter egg for them. The star of one of the DS Castlevania games that are set in like a semi-futuristic environment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I was thinking about that, and part of the reason for that, I think, was the whole Dracula Castle thing is a great analogy for old world power, like medieval times power, where there is a guy in a castle on the hill who's making your life hell, and what you need to do is break down his doors and get rid of him. Mm-hmm. In the modern day, that's not true, you know, as like modernity has taken over as the modern liberal consensus, whatever. It's moved from being a castle on a hill you can point to say who rules you to being something diffuse, something ambient that you just kind of have to breathe in, kind of have to exist within the context of. It is this thing you can't point to anymore, even if you can tell all the signs of its presence.
It's less embodied.
Yes. So if I'm going to write a modern sequel to Rhapsody, I want it to be something about how power is hidden and the gears of control are kept secret from regular people, and all regular people feel is the grinding of those gears, you know? And what if you're people who could peek behind the curtains and see the gears and throw a wrench in them? Obviously, I'd also played Persona 5, where you do a lot of like going inside the brain palaces of people who are causing misery, and I wanted to get some of that in it too. I mean, and the third reason, you know, I wanted to write this game about like political struggle and like forming a grassroots revolution and all that sort of thing. It was 2018. It was 2 years into the Trump presidency. I think Brexit was occurring. And
Post-Brexit vote.
Yeah. I think I was really sort of coming to this feeling that like electoral politics is not the answer to what we're doing. You need to build communities. You need to find friendships and bonds with people around you. You need to fight against alienation from other people and from yourself and from your work. And you need to make something better. You can't just destroy the old. You need to make something better.
Yeah, let's talk about that loop briefly as well. Like the idea of making something better, because it's not the sort of raw anarchist sacred flame. The idea of resistance is itself holy or good, but it's more like here is power, and through violence you can take it. But then what you do with it afterwards matters. And that was something which happened in Rhapsody of Blood. The idea of power, the idea of using power to its own ends, but then also in having that enshrined as a move. That's something which I've always kept at arm's reach from in my game. Like, I pan away at that point. Or I just like, well, let's talk it out, you know? Or like, don't worry about rules for it. But you've got rules for it right there. How was it? Talk a little bit about the creation of that.
Yeah, so I think it was very important to me that this isn't just a game about violence, right? It's what I was saying earlier about, like, you can't just destroy, you have to build.
Yeah.
And, like, that manifests in Voidheart in its relationship mechanics. Like,
yes.
In a very real way, it's your bonds with other people, the fact that you care about them and they care about you, that gives you the ability to topple these oppressors, to like zoom in and stop talking in highfalutin thematic terms. Each of your characters' relationships that is significant enough to go on your sheet has a arcanum of the tarot associated with it. Like, your wise mentor could be the sun, let's say. And your down-and-out brother could be the tower and that kind of thing. And these come with specific moves themselves that trigger, you know, when you hang out with that person, certain things will occur. When you call on the things they've taught you in the city during your mundane investigations, you can break the rules of reality a little. And then when you evoke it inside the castle, you can do miraculous feats. Because, like, a large part of the game is rejecting, like, being isolated, being an individual, right? Rejecting individualism, you know? Your power isn't yours, but exists between you and this other person. Your power doesn't derive solely from the world or from the void, but from the tension between the two. Your power doesn't come from the mundane world or in the castle, but you have to be powerful in both. You kind of have to hold contradictory things, different things together in your heart in order to survive.
Your Voidheart?
The symphony of two things.
Symphonically.
Yes, exactly. You have to act in concert.
It's interesting writing games about revolution, about political action in that way. Because, I was in the same country and the same industry as you during this time, and I wrote Spire, which is much less hopeful and much more violent. And is a direct response to waking up one morning and finding that a significant portion of my country are either ignorant or shitheads. Or both. I was quite angry at that. But, Spire has been posited by some critics in a way I'm not going to view as entirely unfavourable, basically sort of LARPing at being a liberal, or LARPing at being a revolutionary. Oh,
it's way more... it's not liberal, it's definitely revolutionary, but yes.
It's like you get to have this cathartic expression of being involved in a fruitful political conflict, and then kind of get it out your system a little bit and settle back in. What sort of, I'm going to use the word, praxis, do you feel that role-playing games, that storytelling games offer in this sense of political conflict?
Yeah, so I have been thinking about this a bunch because, we are artists, we are role-playing game authors in a time of significant political problems. It's very often very easy to think that we're just providing a release valve, or we're just providing an opiate for people to...
play pretend.
Yeah. I don't think that is correct. All revolutions need art. There's the quote of, if your revolution doesn't have dancing, then I won't be a part of it, Fundamentally, humans make art.
Yes.
And saying that art is unimportant and art is irrelevant to a struggle is incorrect. But also, art has limitations, right?
Yeah.
When you get down to it, what we want is to improve people's living conditions, stop people's suffering, improve their happiness, and all of that comes from material effects, right? Giving them a place to live, food to eat, compassion and care and community, all these things. Art can't, in and of itself, do that. Art is a sort of thing projected on the wall that's made of light, not matter. But what it can do is provide space for people to do a few different things that are very important. Firstly, you can celebrate the idea that this is a good thing to do. That's real important. Secondly, it's a space for people to come together in telling stories about that. You're building community right there whenever someone plays a role-playing game.
Yeah, we got it.
And if the game is saying how XYZ is a good thing, and everyone at the table, I'm not going to say they were convinced by the game, but they came there to play that game, which means that they're all people who kind of think that's a good thing, which means you look around your table and you've got some like-minded people, maybe.
Yeah.
That's great. And the third thing is to model this kind of struggle, right?
Evoke or model?
No, I mean model. Back before I was an RPG designer, right? My day job, full-time, my day job was modeling infectious diseases, right? Charting, I don't know, how the immune system response to influenza works, or how mosquitoes bounce back after you kill their larvae, that kind of thing. And that's never going to, in and of itself, cure disease, right? And it might not even be factual in terms of it's not going to be accurately predicting.
Sure.
But it can say, if the dynamics we've established are correct, if you do X, Y is more likely to occur, kind of thing.
There's a mimetic quality to it, yeah.
And you can take that knowledge and bring it to real-world interventions, to real-world actions, and you're a little bit better equipped. It's like wargaming, right? Not the wargaming of Warhammer miniatures on the table, but the wargaming of the Ministry of Defense plotting out how they think an invasion will go or whatever. But this is from the other side, this is the anarcho-communist wargaming or whatever. It's talking about, okay, if we were to take action to help people, take action to stop those people who are hurting everyone, what are the likely consequences of that? What are the things we'd have to be aware of? What are the struggles that we'd have to face? I mean, that's why Voidheart has a substantial amount of its mechanics devoted to things like burnout and spreading yourself too thin, or making yourself like the figurehead of the revolution instead of like just one part of it, or, falling into hierarchical feelings yourself, and like the danger of creating the castle's hierarchy again in miniature and all that sort of thing.
It's a great reveal 2/3 of the way through the campaign, though. The castle was inside you all along.
Yeah. That's why fealties are stat on the character sheet. Everyone's got it a little bit.
Yeah. I feel as though like the abstraction, the fantastical elements are like your direct action against the hierarchy is abstracted into a fantastical realm. And honestly, the more accessible, the more... I'm probably not going to start throwing Molotov cocktails, but I could probably go and help people. And not even just help people like in a direct charitable way, but in terms of forming communities. And in terms of forming communities not based around capitalism. Not based around like we're going to engage in this spending money on the same thing together. We're going to go to this place where we need to spend money to see each other, but more like we are going to spend time with one another in a way which is important and grants us power. That is actionable.
Yeah,
and that is revolutionary.
To go deep into like political theory here, right?
That's why we're here.
This is why like the game is like, and I am anarcho-communist instead of communist, right? Because communism involves this big toppling of the powers and establishment of like a new ruling force that transitions gradually into the rulership of the communes, yada, yada, yada. Anarcho-communism is more about you create a bubble. You create a space where the rules of capital and hegemony and all that sort of thing stop at the border. Within this bubble, yes, we need to work, we need to make money, but within this bubble, we will not treat each other's worth as determined by money or work, right? And then you gradually try and get more people into your bubble. You try and get it bigger. You try and link up with other bubbles until eventually the bubbles are everything. Yeah, bubble is an interesting analogy because I did some work with Mana Project on Project 99, which is their anarchist game. The best way I can describe it is it's an anarchist utopia game set in a capitalist dystopia, and the core unit of player characters in that is temporary autonomous zone, or TAZ. And the idea being that if you're doing proper anarchism, it can't endure. It's not supposed to endure. And building things which endure in physical or geographical terms is so intensely related to the idea of property and investment.
I'll be honest with you, Mina. The second we stopped hunting and gathering, things really went downhill for us politically.
I really recommend The Dawn of Everything by David Graeber to talk about that. Good. He looks into specifically hunter-gathering societies and other societies that existed before, like, European colonizers eradicated them, to investigate other ways of being. The way he talks about, like, how much labor actually needed to be done in most hunter-gathering communities that we have information for sounds great. Like, you put a few hours of work in collecting food, and then you're done for the day. Because there's not actually that much work that needs to be done to keep a group of people alive if there's no landlord or rent seeker extracting that labor for their own needs.
There's no one else who's not doing the work.
Yeah. I mean, like, you own your house, right? I own my house.
Well, I've got a mortgage, but yeah.
Well, sure, we got a mortgage.
Bank owns my house.
But having a mortgage is so much better than paying rent. Because you know, if you're paying rent, it's probably your landlord has a mortgage that they're using the rent to pay for and making some profit on the side.
Probably has 20 fucking mortgages.
Exactly. And they're one missed rent payment shy of getting foreclosed on all of them or whatever. Yeah. And obviously, in a perfect world, there wouldn't be mortgages either. The houses would be created by the community according to who needs them, whatever. Yeah. That's a sort of microcosm of how much easier things can be inside these bubbles. We may be going afield, but that's the kind of thing I'm talking about, of like other ways of being.
It is a political game. And also, there's no such thing as non-political art. It fascinates me to see these fucking chuds rock up on social media and be like, keep politics out of my games. Like, why? How dizzyingly boring it would be to have a game without politics in. And how like plastic or immaterial art that didn't reflect the behaviour or the philosophy and the leanings of the artist would be.
Well, that's the thing.
That there is content.
even if you had the driest fucking possible RPG, like,
GURPS.
when your character does a thing that the group thinks is important, roll a d6, and on a 4+,
Communist
they do
Day.
it. Okay, yep. But, like, even then,
Yeah.
well, like, the elephant in the room, right, is that we are making these games, and then we're printing them, and then we're selling them, so that we can live and make food, eat food and such. But the fact that, A, we can print books and put them in stores worldwide, that's political. B, the fact that we can make enough money to live off that is political. C, the fact that we need to do that in order to live is political.
And the fact that a trans author can have a book published, but I think we're I don't know if we're majority trans at Roanoke and Deckard.
We're certainly...
We're edging up on it. I think we can go majority queer. How about that?
Yeah, definitely majority queer, yes.
Yeah. Trans author published by a queer publishing house can generate sufficient money to not die. That is a political act. And sorry, the game is about overthrowing capitalism through grassroots friendship. Like the existence of the book, regardless of the content, is a political act.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, this is why you can't lose sight of material conditions as well, not to be a parody of a leftist or whatever, but like, I know.
Kind of are. We're publishing a powered by the apocalypse game about revolution.
Yeah, okay, all right. I know, there's a lot of talk these days online in left-leaning circles about whether X piece of art is problematic or not, and whatever.
Fuck, that's exhausting.
It's so exhausting. I mean, you can talk about what sort of worldview a piece of art creates, but that doesn't make it good or bad.
No.
This is what I was saying earlier with, like, art is not political action, right?
No.
Art is the photons projected onto the wall. They cannot feed someone's belly. What can feed someone's belly is the work making the art. And you can talk about who is making this art and who is its consumption supporting and all that sort of thing. And like,
what does it espouse as beautiful? What does it espouse as right and correct?
Exactly. And, you know, there are hard questions for us to answer, like, why should I, a white woman who's somewhat well off, as I said earlier, I own my house with a mortgage, why should I be making this story? Why should the money go to me instead of someone much worse off, you know? And it's tough, right? But at the end of the day, I make art, get paid, help others be the same.
Sounds good. And crucially, like, in terms of the scale, in terms of, like, well-offness, you're not...
No, it's true.
Like, none of us are on the winning side, aside from those guys at the top.
Yeah.
None of us are getting out of this alive.
And crucially, like, if I was doing any other job that I was qualified for, I would probably be making double or triple the salary. Well, and I'm very lucky in my circumstances that I can do this full time.
As you've yet to mention, you are a doctor. Of microbiology?
Zoology, technically, but I did specialize in microbiology and pathogens.
You've got a talent to fall back on, and I'm not a doctor of anything. Well,
now, I will say...
Mixology and love, but aside from those two...
I haven't been a research scientist for, 8 years now, and I'm so much happier now, and my brain is so much different with all the drugs, and prescription drugs, important.
So, we were asked by our producer, Shan Evans, to come up with some great sound bites that we could make into hashtag content for our... We don't have a TikTok, thank Christ. Do you have anything pithy or marketable you'd like to say?
Jeez.
Maybe we can slip that in organically, because I'm interested in talking a little bit about the fluff behind Voidheart Symphony. You know, as I mentioned earlier, you've been traditionally, historically, very hands-off in terms of fluff and giving players a couple of cues and then letting them fill in the rest of the details themselves. During the marketing process and during the setup for this crowdfunder campaign, I did some writing, and I had to take a stab at what the castle was and what the fiction is behind Voidheart Symphony. Could you talk to us just a little bit, like, metaphysically? We got your letters. We got your letters, and we're going to put in a chapter with some fiction and some fluff in it, which you can read. We're going to baby bird you a story which then you can baby bird to your players. But can you talk me through the cosmology of the castle?
I get 5 letters every day, all nicely signed in different handwriting by G. Howitt. So, okay.
That's a fucking setting!
Big picture, right? Mm-hmm. There is 2 realms. There is the mundane world. You know it. You exist in it. It's not just like atoms and matter. It's also people's connections with each other. It's the fact that you need a roof over your head and food to eat. It's all the things that put requirements on you.
A culture and tradition element as well to it.
Yeah. It's everything that is. And that includes, social constructs and what have you. Mm-hmm. And then there is the void. And the void is nothingness, but it's nothingness that's full of everything that isn't. But it's also hungry, and it's kind of about empowerment. Like you go into the void, you touch the void, and suddenly you're the only thing that matters. And your needs are so important, and your power and strength is so cool and interesting, and nothing else matters. Everything is possible, but it's not real.
It's potentially real.
Yes, exactly. So behind the screen, you've got that stuff I talked about. In Rhapsody, the castle is a thing on this hill, an imposition that is sucking the life out of your community, a physical thing. And now it's
physical blood out of your community, yeah.
That happened in the backstory of the setting, and then something changed, where instead of manifesting again when the blood moon rises, it's just everywhere and nowhere at all times. It is...
The twin scions, Thatcher and Regan, enshrined it in shadow.
Something like that, yeah. It's unclear whether this was its final victory or a great defeat or whatever else that caused this. But along with the, onset of modernity, the castle turned from being this imposition of the void onto the world to instead colonizing the interface between the two. So, everyone in Voidheart Symphony, at their core, is defined by their relationship with the world and with the void, right?
Yeah.
Mundane people, it could be like, the world tells you you have responsibilities, the void tells you you have dreams. For rebels, the main characters, the world tells them other people matter, the void tells them I matter. And you've got to maintain both of those. The castle tries to colonize that interface, tries to get rid of all other ways of framing that dyad, so that under the castle, it's just the world tells you that the powerful deserve service, the void tells you that the powerful deserve power. And it is lurking in this interface between material reality and imagination, whispering into someone's inner demons, hooking into them and filling them with its power, spinning out their inner world into another structure, another wing to add onto itself as it spreads across this interface like a cancer, like a fungus.
While I was trying to understand it, I said it was like one of those Play-Doh machines that instead of squirting out a tube in the shape of a star, it's in the shape of capitalism.
Yes.
That's perhaps the sort of pithy thing that you get a marketing person to write rather than the actual truth.
There's a thing of do you know the concept of capitalist realism?
No.
Okay. So it's an idea, I can't say off the top of my head who put it forward, a large component of stories we tell each other under capitalism is the idea that this is the only way things could be.
Absolutely, yes.
This is the only way for people to interact with each other.
To imagine the end of capitalism is to imagine the end of the world.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So a large part of Voidheart is breaking out of that, is the idea that a better world is possible, and that's a revolutionary idea. And so you are trying to push forward your own ways of viewing the world, your own rules for how things should be. Because, the castle sees these great ineffable forces, what is, what isn't, what is material and what is immaterial, the yin and the yang. And, it sees the yin-yang symbol and wants it to be a Pepsi logo instead.
Listeners, if you've not looked up the Pepsi Design Bible... and I use Bible in the absolute most accurate term. Perhaps the Pepsi Design Gospel would be more accurate. This fucking unhinged design where the Pepsi company employed a brand company to redesign their logo, and they made it slightly softer from what I can remember. But they are comparing the interlocking teardrop tadpole shapes of Pepsi to the yin yang, and I think like you raising that and sort of you using that as a metaphor for the castle is fascinating. To have an all-encompassing philosophy, an absolute theological underpinning of yin and yang, saying, I reckon we could probably sell a brown fizzy drink with that.
Yes. Exactly. And things like comparing disgusting. The orb to the globe and gravitational pull of Pepsi and that kind of thing is such a... I don't know, like...
It's fucking fizzy drinks!
It's insane. But, like, that's the thing, right, is we don't perceive the world as it is, right? Everything we see about the world goes through the filter of our minds and our imaginations. Mm-hmm. In real truth, like, we don't experience the world, we experience a hybrid of the world and our concepts. And that's why, like, there are so many big lies, as Terry Pratchett called them, things like justice and right and wrong and rights and responsibilities. Those aren't things that actually exist, but they are real. And, like, part of, like, this kind of magical realist revolutionary struggle is the fight to create your own concepts or like create space for your own concepts and therefore change the world.
To make something holy other than power.
Yes.
You know what? I sounded pretty clever there. I think I might wrap this up. Oh, actually, sorry, one more thing I am going to ask. Why did you write Voidheart Symphony?
To be a stepping point to the third game in the series.
Oh, yes, that's the what's Black Star...
Dark Star Anthem.
Dark Star Anthem. Yes, this Mina pitched this.
That's basically all the design I've done for it is creating the name, but I have a lot of ideas. What if you kind of succeeded in undermining anyone's attempts to, like, define what reality is, but then reality kind of evaporated as a result?
Oh no.
And you're all just, like, on blobs of the reality that meant enough to you that you were able to hold on to it. It's suspended in the void, and you're going on a road trip to try and find other clusters of reality and bolt them onto your home like plane and like gradually like katamari your way through the stars as you legitimately, physically, literally build a better world. That's the idea.
In your van.
Well, it's like if the van and the road it was on were suspended in a void and you're trying to add other truck stops to it, you know?
I too was dissatisfied with the original ending of Neo Genesis Evangelion. And I'm glad that both us and the makers are continually trying to do it better. Get in the fucking soup, Shinji. Right, Thank you, Mina. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for and listener. Thank you for joining us as well. I hope we generated some capital with this advertisement. Thank you for listening to this Fireside Chat. You can find all the information about today's guest in the show notes and get the game on our website, which is rowanrookanddeckard.com. Don't miss Voidheart Symphony on Backerkit.com, where you can sign up for its upcoming re-release. The show is in the link notes. The link, Richard Linklater, is in the show note. Some vocal warm-ups. We're going to do a lion face. I'm going to do a lemon face. Oh, that's a good...
Thank you.
That's brilliant. I love it.